Hi, my name's Anne, and I've just recorded an episode of the Pour Over podcast. Go right ahead and listen to it.
Welcome to the Pour Over podcast. I'm Jade, and I'm here with James.
Hello.
And Colin.
Hello.
This is a show where we talk to people from all sorts of backgrounds, from artists and musicians to business owners and biohackers, and everything in between. In this episode, we talk to Anne about her new sci-fi book, Utopia Five, what it's like to teach an Oscar-nominated actress to paint, and what exactly ethics in technology is.
Well, thanks for coming in, Anne. Nice to see you. How are you?
I'm very well, and it's good to see you too.
Thank you. When you agreed to come on the podcast, I was super excited because you are a very interesting person and also very diverse. You do a lot. You do a lot of different things. Excuse me. You work in technology. That's your kind of day job, is it?
Yes, that's what pays the bills.
Yep. You did a conference last year about ethics in technology.
Yes.
You paint. You're a naive artist, is that?
That's correct, yeah.
That's right. We'll talk a bit about that as well. But more recently, you released a sci-fi novel called Utopia Five.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that.
Earlier this year, I decided that I would try something new that I'd never done before. So I write quite a lot. As a technologist, I write quite a lot for tech magazines and that kind of thing. So I'd written an awful lot of non-fiction. And I've always loved science fiction. I really enjoy science fiction. I've loved it since I was 5 years old. And it felt like I spent years practicing writing. I should give science fiction a whirl, particularly as an awful lot of the stuff I was working on in tech at the moment, like the conference on tech ethics, was really about stories. It was about things that will be happening soon in science and in technology that we might think are utopian or we might think are dystopian. So it seemed like a good way to try and get some of those ideas out by writing them down and putting them in a near future world so that we could all look at them and decide whether that was something we wanted or we didn't want.
And go on.
How did you find the change going from writing tech documents / publications to writing a novel?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't really find it that much of a change. I was really expecting to, but I think because of what I'd taken as the subject, it's so techy and it's so near techy that it just felt like a slight extension of what I was already doing rather than a massive change. If I was writing kind of Western romances or something, then I think I would have found that quite a stretch. But writing about what tech is doing now, because although I've set the book in the future, 30 years in the future, and it is speculative fiction, almost all of it is actually true somewhere now. So there's an awful lot of what I talk about which is already happening in China. So it's not really science fiction, really. It seems like it because it's not going on here.
What element of it, I mean, without giving away any of the kind of twists and turns, but I guess, would it be this kind of surveillance element of it? That's the stuff that you're kind of talking about in terms of that China are doing? Yes,
because there's an awful lot in the book, and this isn't too much of a reveal because this is revealed almost immediately, which is about a surveillance society and what's going on if you're watched all the time and how that might change your behaviour. How that might change your behaviour. And in the UK, of course, we are really recorded almost all the time. I mean, we were talking earlier about Siri and Google Home and Alexa. They're listening in your homes all of the time. You are constantly surveilled. But in the UK, it's mostly by private companies. So you don't know what the data is. You're being watched all the time. You don't know who's actually doing it. In China, it's mostly the state. And so people do know who's doing it. It's the state. But they're still being surveilled all the time. We tend to think of the Chinese system as being quite dystopian. But actually, it's exactly the same system we have now. It's just, is it worse for the government to be watching you, or is it worse for Amazon to be watching you?
I suppose Amazon can't put you in prison.
Well, that's true. And unfortunately, the Chinese governments are not averse to doing that. So, Actually, they don't tend to put people in prison, but they do publicly shame them. So if you jaywalk, they'll put your picture up on giant billboards so that everyone can see that you are an antisocial jaywalker. They also have a thing where you're not allowed to travel if your social credit scores fall below a certain level, that kind of thing. You're not allowed to use the trains. You're not allowed to go anywhere on the plane.
How is that measured? How do they measure that? In terms of, are they? I guess it's not Facebook, is it? It's what's the name of their social network? WeChat.
It's a lot of it is WeChat, right, actually.
Okay.
Yes, that's a good point, because we tend to think of it as being the state in China, but actually it's also a lot of private business in China. But the private business in China is very tied into the state. So WeChat actually do huge amounts of ratings of you that they then give to the state. So it might be that you haven't paid your WeChat bills and therefore you can't use a plane. I'm not saying that is actually the thing, because I don't know that it necessarily is, but it varies a lot from one area of China to another. But there's an awfully big tie-in between business and government on surveillance. But it's an interesting one. I was listening to a BBC World Service programme on this earlier today, and it was saying that the reason why this is so prevalent in China is because people like it. It's really effective because it's really useful to know who you can trust. You know who you can lend money to, and you can actually get loans that you couldn't otherwise get because people know that actually you pay off your WeChat bills. And because China hasn't had that in the past, people haven't had access to some of the things that require a level of trust for you to do. So that's the reason why everybody's signing up for it, because it's actually of benefit.
And what it's ending up doing in that example is giving people access to the financial industry and that side of thing, which is known for being quite difficult to do for people of certain financial standing, basically.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if you come straight out of rural China into the cities and you have literally no credit history, no history at all, you need to build it up quite quickly. Yeah. And you don't necessarily have a strong network of people who know you, that kind of thing. It has worked out very well in China, although it's also quite dystopian. So it's quite it's difficult to know which way we're going to go with that kind of stuff.
But that was the idea in your book, was there are no secrets because everything is kind of recorded. And that's an interesting thought, isn't it? Just
yes.
Kind of, if everything's out there, then you have nothing to hide.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that. It's kind of...
Well, it's meant to
that, right?
It's meant to make you really kind of question whether if you want that kind of transparency in your own life. But then I assume it would go both ways if you were to implement that in the real world. If there's transparency on the individuals, there has to be transparency for for all the groups and for all the companies and that kind of stuff. So then it's not just a case of them watching us, we're watching them at the same time, whether it makes them act accordingly because they know all of their actions are being scrutinised.
Yes, everybody has to behave better is the idea. It's an interesting one because I find, which I wasn't necessarily expecting, I thought people would like it more than would go, this is a really good idea, we should all do this. But what I found is that the older people are, the less they like it. The younger people are, the more they like it.
Is that something to do with social media and youngsters today? They're just kind of, stories, for example. When I first was introduced to the idea of having something up for 24 hours and then it disappears, I was like, what's the point? What's the point? Yeah. But I kind of, now we have to be involved in that sort of thing with the coffee shop. I understand it more now. I'm kind of like, okay, I get that. There's something nice about that.
The other thing, and I haven't really put this in the book, but it's one of the things that has made me think about this. So back in the very, very early days, when I was first a software engineer in the early 90s, I worked on email systems like Microsoft Exchange. And one of the things that you realize very, very quickly is if you put something in an email, it's not secure anymore. It's out of your hands. It is, don't write anything. Everything I used to say to people all the time, do not write anything in an email that you wouldn't be happy for everybody to see. Because no matter how good a security system is, if there's something really embarrassing or juicy in an email, it will get out. You know, it's but the same is true because no security system is perfect. Absolutely no security system is perfect. There are people, there are gaps, there are holes. Everything you say in your house that's being recorded by Alexa, and let's face it, in my house, that's everything I say in the house. I mean, I might say, well, Amazon will do a pretty good job of keeping it secure, but you can't ever guarantee that. You know, even if they didn't have any desire to exploit the data to do anything, you can never, anything that you say in public, anything you say that's recorded, you have to assume it's public.
That's why I don't have Alexa.
You don't have one?
I don't have it in my house. But then I have a mobile phone.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
your phone does the same
Which is on all
thing.
the
Which is
time.
on all the time. But you can't, well, they say you can turn Siri off, right? And Siri's the thing that's listening.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of stop at like Google Home. Google Home and all those ones. I can't. I just can't. That's where I stop. I'm like, no, that is too obviously listening.
I have a friend who has them in almost every single room, and he controls. Do you
Yeah,
the
me
same?
too. My husband loves them. He puts them everywhere.
Wow. And you're not concerned about?
No, because we don't really say anything that's worth blackmailing us over. Well, I used to, in one of my many millions of bizarre jobs, I did write spyware for a while and sell it. It was self-spyware, so I sold it to people to spy themselves, which you think is a crazy thing. But actually, it's not a crazy thing at all. People really enjoyed it. People really used it. Because it's all this data that all these organisations have on you is really useful for you to look at. So I used to sell it to, in the early days, I sold it to mostly engineers and people who were they would use it to record what they did on their computers so that they could then bill people accurately. And then latterly, by then, it was lawyers and things who were all recording themselves with it. And it was an odd one because people used to have to send me, I used to just record everything everybody did online, which, as you can imagine, there's quite a variety of things that people do online on their work or home computers. And one of the things that I used to, I hope this is okay to put this on there. One of the things that, one of the debugging techniques I had was that you could just press a button and send me everything you'd done so that I could see if you said, oh, it didn't record me doing this, and I could have a look and see whether you'd done it or why you hadn't recorded. And so people should send me all of their history of what they'd done on the computer all the time. And they'd never seen me in person, but they'd interacted with me on the phone or by email or whatever. And there was some quite eye-opening stuff that people had done online. And they didn't really seem at all bothered about sending me this stuff, as because they cared more about getting it fixed so they could fill out their timesheets correctly than being embarrassed by what other dodgy site they were looking at every day. And it just reminded me, people care about privacy up to a point, but that point isn't very far. I mean, they would be quite prepared to give me information I would have thought could probably get them divorced.
Wow.
So they could get their timesheets fixed. It's kind of like...
So what are your thoughts on social media, like more kind of Instagram, YouTube, Facebook? Where it's more about, because I know you're quite active on Twitter, but I feel like Twitter's a slightly different platform. It's more about finding out information, sharing information, rather than just showcasing your lifestyle. Perhaps? No? Is that?
I think that's maybe giving it too small a description, really. I think it does a lot. It does a lot more than that. And Twitter is still very much about how you want to use it. It's not. It isn't. I mean, for you might use it for like up to the minute. News. You want to see what's going on. You want to see what's trending. That kind of stuff. Fine. But there are a number of people that I speak to regularly via Twitter, not about news, just kind of in general.
Okay.
Just having a chat across Twitter. And I've had some fantastic discussions, which has got absolutely nothing to do.
Public discussions.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, completely public. You can go back through my thread and you can see the conversations I've had with people. Because sometimes it's on a subject that I'm, obviously interested in, and you start talking about it, and then someone else will kind of jump in, and you're like,
okay, but still, then that's kind of, again, that's information. You're trying to find out something. I just feel like, for me anyway, Instagram and Facebook are more kind of, I'm going on holiday, or I want to show you this lovely thing. Whereas Twitter, I don't feel does the same thing. But so what are your thoughts on?
I agree. I really like Twitter. Obviously, I'm on Twitter all the time. It's been enormously good for me for work. Hugely good. It's amazing. A really, really good source of information and networking and contacts. I don't really, actually, I never use Instagram, which is crazy given I actually paint. That's just a ridiculous omission for me. And I don't really like Facebook that much either. It just feels a little bit, as you say, it's a bit like, here's my life. It's marvellous, and you think, well, I think I might want a bit more nuanced than that. And to be honest, Twitter can be the other way around. People quite often put on things going, "Oh, I'm miserable," and you think, "Well, are you? Is this the right place for you to put that? I don't know." And maybe that's true on Facebook as well, but I don't notice that so much.
Well, I after a long time of thinking about it, I took myself off Facebook probably 3 or 4 months ago now, and it's just mainly because I had no real reason apart from the fact that I had been on there for so many years to actually be on there. There was no, if my family members want to talk to me, they have my phone number, they know where I live, right? I don't need to update them in that fashion, and there is that thing of having to constantly kind of update, otherwise it is just pointless.
I disagree, because I'm not very active on Facebook at all, never have been. But when I was travelling, I used that as a way to contact everyone rather than sending emails to however many people. So there are some photos on Facebook of me, and every now and then, if something like pops up, like a time hop or whatever, there's something nostalgic about that. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that moment.
I have an iPhone. Your iPhone can do that.
Yeah, I suppose.
If that's what you're on Facebook for,
no, but
so
then
much data,
okay, if you did have a good circle of friends who all left comments on a particular event, and you're like, no,
I've downloaded all of my data from it, so
okay, so
I have it. It's not like I just shut it and didn't do that. The first thing I made sure was that I can actually take all that data with me, but it just served no purpose. I was finding myself just being on there because it was part of my social media routine, rather than feeling compelled to go on there for an actual reason. I really didn't have one. Whereas with Instagram, I'm like, I enjoy Instagram. I enjoy kind of looking through it. I enjoy seeing what people are doing in that format. For now, I think I will get bored of it. And Twitter still is the one that I enjoy the most. I just feel like it's a much more varied experience. Like, it has elements of Instagram in that sense of being able to share things visually, but it also has more of a conversation. And I feel like you really do get exposed to different discussions. Like, I can't be so even if you curate your friends, like the people that you follow and that kind of stuff, you still get exposed to other people's ideas, other discussions, just because of the way it's built and the algorithms that they use. So I feel like it's a bit more open, whereas Instagram, I don't feel like does that, unless you go to the browse function, which still pulls towards what you're into or what you've liked before. Whereas Twitter's kind of a little bit more chaotic than that. I kind of enjoy that.
But there's a problem with all of them, which is they're a terrible time suck. I love Twitter, but I spend way too much time on it. If I was on Facebook, it would be disastrous. I would never say, I certainly wouldn't write a book. and there's an issue with that, because I wouldn't write a book if I was just on social media all the time. It kind of burns off your need to do things by providing you a kind of a short-term, quick-fix outlet for creativity and that kind of thing. I suspect that I would suffer from that with Instagram, actually.
But if you use Twitter a lot to promote conferences and obviously the book.
Yeah.
So is that, that still work technically, or do you leave a separate time for that, or?
It's kind of still work, isn't it? Yes. actually, that's one of the worst things about going online or going to Twitter, is that you start doing something totally sensible, and then 3 hours later,
looking at pictures of cats.
absolutely looking at pictures of cats.
And how is the book doing? It's self-published, right?
It is, yes, independently published through Amazon. So I've thought about looking to get a publisher on it, but they don't really provide a great deal these days compared to just doing it yourself. And I'm a bit of a control freak. I like to have all the control. Eventually, I might decide I'm bored of that or whatever, but I quite like to just be able to do whatever I want whenever I want it and publish it as soon as I like and don't get held back on.
And how's it doing?
Well, I've sold over 100, which is not bad in a month. Apparently first books generally sell about 100 and that's it. So
Hit your target.
that's it. My last sale was this morning.
And that wasn't.
I was going to say. And you're writing a sequel already.
I am.
And when is that?
Well, I have. So I did 3,000 words today. I'm quite focused. I want to get the first draft done by the end of next week. So I'm on 30,000 words. And then it does take me another month or so of editing. But if you do the stuff yourself, the tools for writing books these days are fantastic. You can do the covers look great. You can design your own covers. You can do all the typesetting and everything else. And
What are you using?
really good. It's something called KDP, which is an Amazon desktop publishing, basically, system, Kindle desktop publishing, and it's really, really good. The results, the books look fantastically slick. So as soon as I've finished it, basically, I should be able to get it out as a slick-looking book in days, which is a total change. It's mad, isn't it?
I mean, if you need someone to like, I don't know, read it, and I'm sure you're more than capable of sense checking, but I'd be happy to.
Oh,
Like,
I will
just to
take
kind
you
of
up on that.
Fire through it. Yeah.
And so is the plan to have a series of these books, or is this the last one?
No, there will be a whole series of them. So apparently, if you're an independent publisher, you really have to have 10.
Wow.
You don't have 10, then you can't make any of the marketing work in terms of the cost, because you really need, if people are buying one, to buy the other 9 as well. So I'm going to have to do 10, and even though I am quite fast, 10 is going to take me a while. Yeah, but I don't. So I know what's going to happen in 2. Well, 2 is nearly done. 3, I know what's going to happen. 4, I know what's going to happen. And the rest, I have a bit of an inkling about what's going to happen, but we'll see where it goes.
And I guess in terms of your process, like, now that you've obviously done one book and you're halfway through your second, do you feel like the characters are making their decisions, or are you still kind of very much in God mode and like putting situations in front of them and kind of forcing them into a certain way? Like, are you, do you know what I mean?
I do know exactly what you mean, yeah. And so on this one, I would say I'm still slightly pushing them into a situation. So I've decided, they're going to go here. But then once they're there, they don't necessarily do what you're expecting them to do. And I suspect that's going to happen more and more as we go on.
Yeah, the more you live with the characters, the more they take on their own, like their real personality, and just kind of do whatever they're going to do.
Yeah. Well,
I assume. That's,
yes, that's definitely the case. And actually, you start to think about things, and then you think, oh no, Lee would do that. It wouldn't, and or oh no, Lee did that in the last book. That means that this has to happen because it couldn't happen. That would happen, and then this didn't happen. So it's in some ways the books write themselves because you realise that there was something that you did that was actually either sometimes out of character, sometimes in character, but wrong, but likely to cause them a problem later on. It does kind of write itself. It's quite good.
So what does your desk look like? Have you got Post-it notes of like things that happen? Because if you're writing 10, exactly. If you're planning to write 10, or you know what's going to happen, book 5, you've got to have some kind of.
I basically, my desk is a Google document. So I have all my ideas go into that, and I kind of put the chapters together. So as I'm writing the book, I'll start filling out, I'll kind of think, oh no, this is going to have to happen. Right, okay, I'll do a chapter outline and stick that at the end and know that at some point I have to put this chapter in. So if it's in the book, it's quite easy like that. And then at the end, you've kind of got all the chapters, and then you realise you just have to put them in the right order and then fill them out. But I've also got a section which is all the ideas that I've had for the next one, to make sure that, and I've forced, well, I finally forced my husband to allow me to talk about what's going to happen in the future books. Because to start with, he said, no, you can't tell me about what's going to happen in the future books because it's a spoiler and it'll spoil it for me. But it's quite hard to not have anybody to talk to about what's going to happen in the future books. So he has relented on that.
You need someone like that, right? Otherwise, because you need to run it by someone as well.
Yeah.
Does this make sense? Is
Is this plausible?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And the cover art of the book is a painting by you. Was the painting first or the book first? Did one influence the other?
They kind of did influence each other, yes. So I had been commissioned to do a painting that was going to be auctioned for charity at a tech conference last year. So, and I realised when I was doing it that I really wanted it to be the cover for my first book. So I kind of put things into it that I knew I was going to put into the book. Right. So it became a kind of a work in progress, a kind of a balance of ideas from this go to ideas from that. Yeah.
Nice. And that kind of art you refer to yourself as a naive artist?
Yes.
And what does that mean?
Well, actually, do I refer to myself as a naive artist? I am.
Well, at least you did whilst you exhibited here.
I did, that's true. I used to be a member, and I have let it lapse, and I really need to fix that up. I used to be a member of an organisation that's rather unfortunately known as the Association of British Naive Artists. So the idea of a naive artist is that you are self-taught, which I am self-taught, which means you tend to use techniques that are slightly different to the techniques that you would be taught if you wanted something. So I would say probably my paintings are not going to last for 500 years. They'll probably last for 100 years, but they probably won't last for 500 years. But do I care? Well, 500 years is a long time, let's face it. It's not going to last 500 years anyway.
And with your paintings, I always found, like, and this was last year you exhibited here, there was something ominous about your paintings. They're kind of vibrant and bright and these jolly kind of landscapes, but there was something a little bit, I don't know, eerie maybe, these faceless sheep or black crows or the kind of power stations or lighthouses, which is kind of like a dystopian landscape. So there's clearly something in your paintings and in your writing that...
Yes, I do like it to be a little bit unclear. I like people to be able to read what they think into the thing, which means, it's not just a flower, but a sinister flower.
Yeah, sinister. That was the word I was looking for.
But I do notice that some people are just cheerful and they don't notice any of the sinister stuff. I kind of think you want.
So is it telling of my?
It is slightly.
Psychopath.
Rorschach.
So you also worked with an actor with your painting style, didn't you?
Yes. So this was a couple of years back now. I taught a Oscar-nominated actress how to paint like a naive Nova Scotian artist for a biopic of her life. So this was Sally Hawkins, who was Oscar nominated for Best Actress this year. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, she's
I
brilliant.
would love Sally to voice over my book. She's marvellous. She's a bit on the steep side for me, I would suspect. But she's a fantastic actress and really, really nice woman as well. And actually an extremely good artist. So the film that they made in the end, which came out this time last year, was very, very good. And she painted almost everything in there. By the end, she could forge Maud Lewis. The film was called Maudie. I would totally recommend it. And everything in it, basically, she painted. And
She had a good teacher then, obviously.
we had a good time, I have to say. We had a good time.
Wow. So how did you get that job?
It was through the Association of British Naive Artists. So the director was looking for somebody to teach her who had a similar style to Maud Lewis. Now, and it was actually quite interesting because on the surface our styles don't look similar at all. They look completely different. But actually, in terms of how I do it, it was very, very similar. So although the end result looks quite different, the underlying technique was quite similar. And the director obviously spotted that because it turns out that she had a fine art degree. So she was obviously able to spot that they were, I could teach how to do it because it was quite similar to what I did.
So that's what I like so much about you as a person. You're just you say you're going to do something and then you do it. Like you're going to write a book and you've done it. And same with the Ethics in Technology conference. I remember you saying you were planning this, and then last summer, was it last summer? It happened.
Yeah.
And so, in layman's terms, what is ethics in technology to you? In the conference, what was that about?
Well, it all came back down to something that happened about 2 years ago, which you may have read about in The Guardian. It's always the place where you get these things reported. There was a young engineer at Google called James Damore, who got into loads and loads of trouble for writing a memo that don't put it in an email if you don't want the world to see it. Put it in an email, the world saw it, and it was all about how they shouldn't really have any more women at Google because Google is about things, and men like things, and women like people, and that's why there aren't any women at Google. I thought it was interesting. And there was a huge. He got the sack, not surprisingly, not necessarily because it was a ridiculously stupid thing to do. Because at the time, Google were in the middle of a suit, a legal suit with a lot of women complaining that it was a bad environment. So I thought, oh my goodness me, what a stupid thing to do to write that right at this particular moment. He was obviously an idiot and should be smacked around the head. I would have fired him. I mean, I wouldn't have fired him for saying what he thought, which was not as crazy as, on average, actually, statistically, women are more interested in people, or statistically on average, than men are, and men are statistically on average more interested in things than people. So it's not, it wasn't necessarily a crazy thing to do, but it was an idiotic thing to do in the middle of, they were in the middle of a suit. It probably cost them millions and millions of quid. But the interesting thing about that was not his statement about men and women. Everybody went crazy about, oh no, everybody's interested in things. Women are just interested in things as men. We're all just interested in things. And I thought, well, this is a little disturbing, isn't it? Because Google are one of the biggest and most important companies in the world. All of these, the biggest 6 companies in the world by market cap are tech companies. Are they really only interested in things and not interested in people? And when someone says that, no one even questions it. No one says, well, hang on a minute, we might actually have to think about something other than algorithms, and we might have to think about what the impact is of our technology and why we're doing it. We might actually need to have, we're not 3 guys in a garage doing something for their mates. We are a company that is affecting what goes on for billions of people. We cannot afford that to be entirely about things and not about people. And yet nobody was picking them up on this and saying, well, hang on a minute, it doesn't really matter whether men or women are interested in people or things. We actually need people to be interested in things as well as people at these big companies. And that's what made me start to organise these tech conferences, which is kind of about getting techies to talk about things that are not just an algorithm. They are, well, what does it do and how does it affect people? Because that's the point of making things, isn't it? It's we don't make things for them to affect people. But that's the purpose. And then if you look at what's happened at Facebook since, that's absolutely what happens when you don't think about the effects of the technology that you're producing. So I set up the conferences to try and get people to be a little bit more focused on people as well as things.
And how do you do that? What's the kind of thing that you were teaching them to do?
Well, it was actually at that stage, it was mostly about getting a whole load of people who were thinking about these things into a room to talk about all the different aspects of it. So we had we had a woman who was a human rights lawyer who was campaigning against drone strikes in the Yemen killing innocent people. So her talk was all about, look, when you write these things, it's actually people will die. If you get this wrong, innocent people will die. And then we had various people talking about big data and how it could be used or misused and accessible software. And finally, the final speaker was talking about chatbots, which is so I actually based a lot of the book on what I learned from Steve Warswick, Mitsuku, the world's best human emulating software. And he's very, very keen to make sure that everybody is always aware that chatbots are not people. They are just scripts. Because there's an awful lot of stuff going on at the moment where people are pretending that chatbots are actually sentient, like Sophia, the chatbot. It's just a script. Yeah. It's just a script. And you're lying to people by saying this, and it's dangerous as well because people will assume that computers are always right if you tell them that they're actually sentient and they know what they're doing, as opposed to it's a script and it could have a bug in it. There's a huge, it's incredibly important that people don't over-ascribe correctness to computers. They make mistakes. So that conference was all about that. But since then, we pulled out one aspect of it, which, because we were looking for concrete. So that was a kind of awareness setting thing. But I wanted to pull out some very concrete actions. And one of the concrete actions we pulled out was for climate change. The tech industry, the servers that all of our applications run on, use about the same amount of energy as the entire aviation industry. But we are not under any pressure in tech to do anything about that because no one knows. No one knows what a data center does or anything like that. AV is a huge factor in that. Netflix. Yeah. And we're not under any pressure. So AWS, the Amazon hosting service, which is where Netflix are, produce all this video that requires a huge amount of power to process. It's 50% sustainable power. It's 50% offset what they use. But that means that as they grow, their carbon footprint grows. Now, some of the others aren't. Google are better, Facebook are better, Microsoft are better, but nonetheless, we need to. Amazon are the elephant in the room. They are the future of where things are going to be hosted, and they use a heck of a lot of fossil fuels to power all the tech that you're using, and so we need to be putting pressure on them to change that.
So cryptocurrency as well.
Oh God, cryptocurrency, that's terrible. Yeah, that's the worst. That is actually the worst.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you're burning electricity to create, not a lot of money.
Yeah, it's huge. So cryptocurrencies burn about as much energy as a small country. Yeah. And it's mostly in China, where it's mostly fossil fuel powered. So anybody who has a Bitcoin is utterly unethical.
causing climate change.
I don't have any.
They are causing climate change. None of us have
No.
bitcoins. None of us have bitcoins.
So then what's the solution then? Because these
Well, that's an interesting one. So consumers can choose. Now, individual consumers not so much. Businesses can choose where they host. So we're trying to put a lot of pressure on businesses to choose to host places which are cleaner. Quite often they just haven't thought about it, which again is crazy, because why haven't they thought about it? This is what they do, but they haven't thought about it. If they do think about it, there's more chance that they'll actually do the right thing. In the long run, we really need government action on this.
So when you say cleaner, you just mean energy that comes from like wind farms or
Well, it's an interesting one because it's hard at the moment to run a data center directly off renewable energy because it tends to be not quite steady enough. There are places where you can do that. But there are a lot of countries where there is a great deal of renewable power, like, for example, Ireland. So if you host in Ireland or in Germany, where a lot of data centres are powered from nuclear power, so that's all non-fossil fuel, that's clean. So there are countries that you can choose, which are a lot cleaner. One of the projects that I'm involved in at the moment, I would really like to promote more, is Greenland has an enormous capacity for having data centres that are entirely renewably powered, because Greenland has hydropower has a very, very steady hydropower, which is meltwater runoff from glaciers. And they could easily run a huge number of data centres there, but at the moment it's very early and they don't even have the data connections to Greenland to do that. So it's early days, but those kind of places, Iceland, where they tend to run it from geothermal power, there are lots of places where it's much, much cleaner to host your service.
But not cheaper.
But not cheaper. No.
And
Well, fossil fuels are subsidised, and that's the problem we have at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see why they are, because we kind of need all this stuff to keep us alive, to keep all of the... But there are an awful lot of options out there that don't quite get developed just because fossil fuel is so cheap, people can't be bothered. I was looking into, for my next book, I have been doing a bit of research into atomic-powered cargo ships, which are apparently really not as... they've been done before, and there are some atomic-powered icebreakers out there in the Russian fleet. It's doable, but it's just slightly not commercially viable, given that its fossil fuels are so cheap. But it's quite close. But nobody's really going to do it because fossil fuels are still the cheapest way to do it.
And is there any risk in terms of it being safe
Well, I mean,
to be operating that kind of?
there are a heck of a lot of boats out there which are nuclear powered. All aircraft carriers are, and submarines. So it's actually quite proven technology, and there's never been an accident.
Do you not still have waste from nuclear as well?
Yeah, you do, but it's different
Disposing
kind
of
of
that
waste.
as well. Yeah,
Yes,
it's another
it
thing
is.
that's terrible for the environment.
But it's differently terrible, isn't it? So it's
Something you
Better
can't.
terrible or worse terrible?
You can't get rid
Right
of
now it's
for
kind of better
a long
terrible.
time though, right?
Yes, although there's been a lot
Hundreds
of...
of years.
Well, yeah, versus a bunch of stuff that is just never going to degrade.
Yeah. Yes, I think it is at the moment a slightly better option given where we are.
But long term, it's still not the one, is it?
No, we really want another one. But it's the closest I think we have. Well, actually, solar and wind is doing really well. But solar and wind,
Hydro.
yeah, you can't use that.
can't beat that.
There are lots of things that you can't do with that. So you couldn't. It's not enough for you to. You couldn't power a cargo ship with it.
No. No.
But you could with nuclear. So it's kind of.
So is it not then? It sounds like it's more of a hybrid situation. So using all of the above
Yes.
to cover, using different types of energy for
Avoiding
different types
fossil
of things.
fuels, basically.
Yes.
So it's not just a one fuel to rule them all.
Yeah.
It's trying to use as many as possible. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So have you got another conference coming up?
I haven't done one this year, I have to say. I have to have a think about what I'm going to do next, because I've been so tied up in writing the books. Because I kind of want to see how the books work as a way of... So I've put all of the stuff that's coming out of those conferences into the books. And I want to see whether or not that's a way of getting people to think about and talk about these things. Because actually, the books are very much designed to get people to talk about things that they wouldn't normally talk about. So if it works, it's a very scalable way, much more scalable than getting 100 people in a room to go to a conference. But I have to see. I'll have to see how it goes.
There's been a lot of interesting conversations around like gender bias in data in itself.
Ah, yes.
That's been kind of piquing my interest. There's a good book, and I'll tell you the name so you can put it into the show notes, because the name's escaped me right now. But it's excellent. It kind of talks about the things we would never have thought of where gender bias would come into it in terms of data. I think and I may be misquoting it, so don't take it as gospel. But there was one example which was with crash test dummies.
Oh, yes.
And something to do with like the sizing and the seatbelt position is kind of predominantly for the male body. So it shows all the impact and all the dangers of a male sitting in the driver's seat, but doesn't then, the car seat, the seatbelt position doesn't change for a female driver. It stays in the exact same position, doesn't it? But on average, women are smaller than men, right? So you should be able to adjust the seat level to come across you in a different way.
There must be some danger in having that thing movable, otherwise they would have done, it seems pretty obvious. No? It seems like an obvious design flaw.
You think so? I'll give you the book.
Yeah, I'll read it.
It's genuinely interesting. There's a bunch of other examples, none of which I can think of on the spot, but it was a very interesting thing they were talking about, because it's a ton of things that you never think of, and partly it's because of, I assume, the people who are writing the code, the people who are pulling the data, the people who are crunching the numbers, predominantly male.
Yeah.
So not even on purpose, you're going to end up skewing everything sort of towards yourself, but you're applying it to absolutely everyone. So it's going to cause problems with those.
There was a very interesting program on Radio 4 last week before start of the week, when they had somebody in talking about exactly that in medical studies, that apparently almost all medical research is done on men, and they've discovered some appallingly eye-watering stuff when they actually do it on women.
Yeah.
So thalidomide, for example, was mostly because it wasn't tested on women, and it certainly wasn't tested on pregnant women. So
I think I have a feeling it might actually. It's what is her name? This is terrible. I will check it, and I might even insert me saying the name into that spot.
It's not the weapons of mass destruction book,
no,
is it?
No, I'll look it up. I've got it. I'll check on my phone, and I'll tell you. But it is a very interesting book. I mean, it's one of those books you can read a bit and put down, and read a bit and put down. It's not it's not that kind of narrative thing where you can. It's just excellent. It's really good. It's really interesting. So yeah, I'll pass that on.
Interesting. I was going to ask you something, well, it's kind of related, but nothing to do with ethics and technology. What technology do you use specifically that helps you day to day? Because you said you have Alexa everywhere, and what other... I mean, I'm not at the cutting edge of technology. I use it, obviously, but I'm not I don't use it much to kind of help me out. What would you recommend that's an obvious piece of technology that...
Well, I know what I love, but most other people don't love it. I totally love it to death, which is my Google Chromebook, which is it's a laptop that's where the operating system is effectively in the cloud. There's very little on the machine. So if I lose it, because I always drop things all the time, and I always fear that I'm going to leave my laptop somewhere. I often leave things around places as well. So I don't want anything on the machine. I want to be able to just get a new one and get going with it without having lost anything. And I want it to be super cheap in case I drop it. And it's totally fantastic, and it's very, very secure. It's the securest thing on the market. Not that I have anything, but you know.
It's just for browsing and.
No, you can do anything you like.
Okay.
Really. There's not that much that you actually need. It's got a hard drive, so you can temporarily store things while you're offline, and then as soon as it goes online, it uploads up to the cloud. So you've got a backup, so it's all instantly backed up as well. I totally love it. But that's not a very exciting piece of technology. Is it?
No, I was hoping for something like one of these apps that I don't know. There's always something, isn't there, that's just brilliant.
Actually, I have to say, I don't play around with new tech all that much. Is there anything that I absolutely love and I would... No, I mean, I hardly ever install an app. I can't remember. I haven't installed an app in years.
Oh, fair enough.
Flashlight. I use that quite a lot. So the bizarre thing is, I'm actually the worst person in the world to ask that question of. I am in many ways a total Luddite.
Oh.
Same.
But yeah, I mean, you like obviously Google Docs and things like that.
Yes.
They're all handy tools, aren't they? But,
Yeah.
yeah.
Always ask him how it works.
Yeah. Oh.
I am surprised that we're not more leaning towards that style of working, where all the power is, somewhere on a cloud server somewhere, and you're just accessing it, right? And just using. I guess it's speed of data, right? Like that's what must limit.
To be honest,
That being
it's
done.
fine. I mean, you can live stream TV off. If you can live stream TV up, then it's I'm not going to do any flash trading. But I couldn't do any flash trading on my Windows machine either.
It's just, I find it really interesting because where I work, we still use laptops with all of the programs on it. Whereas I always think like, why don't we just have a keyboard and a monitor and just type in your login details, and it, then you're in, rather than it being taking a laptop with you, like, so you can just sit at any computer anywhere in the world and just be like, right, I'll go to company.com, then just type in these, and then you're in your user interface.
Which is exactly the same as the Chromebook concept.
Yeah.
I don't really understand why it hasn't taken off. So other technologies that haven't taken off that I'm very disappointed by, I would have loved to have a pair of Google glasses. I would have loved it, but they disappeared before.
Yeah, they disappeared into industry.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like it was always going to do really well.
Yeah, head-up displays.
It's excellent for that. Absolutely excellent. They are redesigning at the moment, but it was a little too early. That's the truth of it. It was way too early, and it opened up way too many questions that they couldn't answer in the ethics field, and that whole like constantly being surveilled and not knowing when you're being surveilled. I think it was just too obvious for people.
So it was a pair of glasses that had a camera on them all the time, and people found that quite freaky. But it was quite panopticon-like. I would have loved. I would have totally had one. Loved to have one of those Google glasses. But yes, so that's something I would like. But
It will come back.
Yeah,
It will definitely come back.
that's true.
I mean, maybe not. It will come back in like a pair of normal glasses, like you wouldn't know, and that's. I think people aren't realising that that's going to be the bit where there'll have to be some serious governance involved in when you're allowed to, when you're allowed to film, when you're not allowed to.
Yeah, but I mean, we're all filmed.
Yeah, but it's about people's level of comfort, though, right?
Yeah.
Like if you kind of know you're generally CCTV being filmed, it's kind of a given, right? It's to, like, in my mind, it's to prevent crime, and it's kind of just making sure people that aren't doing bad things. In a really simplistic way, there's an element of people being individually able to film you that's more voyeuristic. I think that's probably what puts people off.
I think it probably is, but I think they'll probably have to get over it.
Yeah. Well, it's coming. It will happen. It will happen. I think AR and VR. I think AR will be the thing that kind of crosses the threshold properly for most people, because I think VR, there's still too many different things that you need to be able to partake in a decent VR experience, and also the amount of time you can wear a headset is limited due to battery power, motion sickness, and a whole bunch of other things that are not fun to experience.
Motion sickness.
Oh
Yes,
yeah,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
yeah. Have
I've
you not done
never,
any?
no.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it makes
Yeah.
you feel really.
Yeah.
It's just uncomfortable. It's not nice. They're cool. They're very gimmicky at the moment, but it will get there. Like
That worries me a bit. Like
which bit?
VR, just kids wearing headsets and just being in kind of like your book, just being in these games,
Oh, there's been.
Yeah.
and it's like more exciting than their actual life.
But that's already true.
Yeah.
Do you think?
without their headsets, yeah.
Yeah,
Like, think
that's
how many
already
kids play
true.
Fortnite. Think how many
Yeah.
play
Yeah.
Call of Duty and all the other like online connected games. They're doing that already. Just because they're gone.
What's AR?
Augmented reality. So.
Like Pokemon games, where you see and then you've got something splattered
Yeah,
onto
right,
the
yeah.
image.
Yeah.
Yes, you've got a mixture of what you're saying and
Yeah.
seeing, and yes.
And but the cool thing is it's getting better and better. Like that, there was a time when they were doing the first kind of apps and showing how it was going to be implemented. It was kind of so obvious that it was AR and that was just something that was sitting there, and it couldn't really. The whole distance perception and having something in front of it wasn't really working out. Whereas now, if I put something there, that wire will be in front of the thing. Like it will essentially interact with the space. So it's getting really, really intelligent, and really that I think is really exciting. So apart from it just being for like games and silly things and frivolous things, there's a lot of really interesting like industry application of it. Super interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry,
I'll be talking more about that in book 3.
Any further thoughts, questions, or is there anything you would like to say that you haven't?
No, well, I should probably say that I come in here every Friday with my writing group, which is just 2 of us. And it's really nice to have the resource to come here and have a coffee and lunch and get working on what we're working on. So I appreciate the space.
Oh, good. Glad we could be of assistance. Thanks for coming and talking to us. When is the second book out? Roughly?
I would say probably August.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
And good luck with the second book.
That was episode 6 of the Pour Over Podcast. Follow us at Pour Over Podcast on Instagram, and you can follow me, Jade, at Black J Films.
You can follow me, James, at Mr. James Stanton on Instagram.
You can follow me, Colin, at Colin_Stanton82.
Thanks for listening. Catch you on the next one.